Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bruno Kreisky Forum for International Dialogue. We're very happy to see so many of you today. And we warmly welcome Mr. Leonid Volkov, please. He is, among many other things, our curator and moderator, Tessa Szyszkowitz, welcome also to you, is going to explain in a minute, but he is the director of the Anti-Corruption Foundation. And when we talk about corruption, usually corruption is linked not only is it undermining democracy, but it is usually closely linked to authoritarianism and dictatorship. And very often also to war. Whereas war is a means to destroy or go against your own population on the one hand, I think Mr. Volkov has a lot to tell us about this, how authoritarianism and dictatorship is actually leading a war against the population in Russia itself. Also, war is, of course, a strategy to fight not only the so-called enemy, or might be enemy within, but also at your borders or beyond. However, whereas war, as we know it maybe from older days, was sometimes seen as a strategy to distract from domestic challenges, nowadays we might also see that domestic challenges are somehow diverted, and we talk about peace deals. So today it's more peace deals that distract from challenges from within. And the word peace itself, also in the context, of course, of Russia and Ukraine, is important to understand. And it's not only Russia, the war of Russia against Ukraine, but also in other areas of this world, where peace is not only a deal which governments or other groups would like to strive for, but it seems that peace is even not achieved, or nobody wants to achieve peace, because although the costs of violence are incredibly high, 19.6 or so trillion US dollar only in the last year, so the costs of violence are very high, but the gains you can make through war on all sides are, it seems, even higher. And so we face in this world where we see also attacks on the multilateralism, on international law-based order, we see that negotiations very often are there to prolong a state of war, where actually a lot of stakeholders, so to speak, can make their gains. We understand this. I think this is an interesting topic also of today. Negotiations, yes or no, sanctions, but it's also, if we look to Iran these days, where people unfortunately commit suicide or kill themselves, or give the message that indeed negotiations with such a regime would prolong the state of dictatorship. So it's very difficult. There's maybe not there's for sure not a one-sentence solution to it, but these are all topics we are very interested in, and which are very difficult and complex. So I'm particularly happy and also proud that you're here. Thank you very much, and thank you, Tessa, for moderating. I wish you an interesting evening, and we wait also for your questions in these very, very difficult times. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Before we start, bis wir anfangen, ich wollte ein paar Wörter sagen. Erstmals, ich möchte um Verzeihung bitten, dass wir das Ganze in Englisch machen werden. Ich kann Deutsch sprechen, aber nicht gut genug, um so eine politische Diskussion zu halten. Sie können aber dann die Fragen gerne auch auf Deutsch stellen, das ist kein Problem. Und dann die zweite, das ist mein zweites Mal hier in diesem Saal. Und in diesem Bezug wollte ich eine ganz kurze Geschichte jetzt erzählen, weil es gibt doch in gewissen Teilen der Welt Stabilität. Bruno Kreisky Forum hat mir zum zweiten Mal eingeladen und in demselben Hotel untergebracht. Und dann so komme ich zu diesem Hotel und ich erkenne diesen Hotel, okay, ich war auch da. irgendwann, ich weiß noch nicht, ich weiß nicht mehr wann, das war wahrscheinlich 2019 oder 2018, und die Dame an der Rezeption, die fragt, okay, sind Sie zum ersten Mal bei uns? Ich sage, nee, ich bin hier schon gewesen. Sie sagt, okay, dann sollen Sie die ganzen Zettel nicht ausfüllen, nur unterschreiben. Und die ausdrückt für mich diesen Zettel und ich sehe da meine Adresse in Moskau. Weil wann ich hier ich wohne seit 6 Jahren im Exil in Litauen. Ich bin in Moskau seit 6 Jahren nicht gewesen, aber da in der Datenbank in diesem Hotel, die haben doch meine Adresse in Moskau. Also ich habe die mit einem ganz besonderen Gefühl untergeschrieben, diesen Zettel. Und so, ich wollte sagen, dass hoffentlich, wenn wir zum nächsten Mal treffen, dann kann ich wieder diesen Zettel verwenden, aber diese Adresse wird wieder mal stimmen. So.
Wunderbar.
Danke für diese Einladung, für diese Möglichkeit, hier wieder zu sein.
Okay, great. Welcome. Let's switch into English so that he gets the language he deserves, although I said to him that his German is absolutely good enough to speak, but okay, as you like. The thing is, I wanted to introduce you a little bit more in depth to the crowd. You were born in 1980 in Sverdlovsk in Yekaterinburg. You are originally an IT engineer, and you became active in the liberal opposition in Russia, where you served as a deputy in the Yekaterinburg City Duma from 2009 to 2013. During that time, it was the high time already of Alexej Navalny, who you became very close to and served basically as his right-hand man till his death. I remember at the presidential election campaign in 2018, I came to Moscow. Before I went, I made appointments with figures in the opposition, and I had a date with you to meet up, and then they arrested you, of course, just before I came, not because of me, but because they just didn't want to have the Anti-Corruption Foundation and Alexej Navalny playing any role in this presidential campaign. No disturbances were allowed. And so I had to invite you to come to Vienna then afterwards, which you just told us about. In 2019, you had to go into exile in any case, move to Vilnius, as you said, where most of the Navalny group had to relocate during those years when opposition became life endangering. As we know, Navalny was poisoned in 2020 in Tomsk. On his way in the plane, when he fell sick, they landed in Omsk, and fortunately Navalny was brought to Berlin and survived the FSB attack on his life when they poisoned him with the nerve agent Novichok. But Navalny went back to Russia already in January 2021, was arrested, tried on false frauded grounds, and put into prison, where he died almost exactly 2 years ago in a Russian Straflager in the Russian Arctic. 2 years after his death, Leonid, where is the foundation standing? How is the situation with Yulia, who is now officially took the role of her dead husband?
Well, the foundation exists, and that's already something. That was not granted, given all the pressures that we've experienced over these years. We've collected all the possible badges of honor that exist in the Russian Federation for those whom Putin believes are his enemies. We are foreign agents, we are undesirable organizations, we are extremists, we are terrorists. Actually, on the same day, they designated us as terrorists as they excluded Taliban from the list of the terrorist organizations, so kind of like they replaced Taliban with us. And of course, then they killed Alexei in 2024, 2 years ago, which was a deadly blow, and that's a open wound which will never be cured. Yulia indeed vowed to continue his late husband's work, and we vowed to support her. So, like, well, on my virtual business card, I don't have a real one, but where it stands like Chief of Staff for Alexej Navalny, now it's written Chief of Staff for Yulia Navalny. That's what I'm basically doing, like helping her with her political work, with her very important political work. And that's what the whole foundation is doing. The foundation is now much smaller than it used to be. When we operated from Moscow, we used to have 45 regional offices in all major Russian cities. We had a vast network of activists. We participated in local political campaigns. We supported independent candidates running in elections. Most importantly, we participated in elections ourselves, despite we never were allowed to register a political party. And most importantly, we won these elections. So it's hard to imagine now, 4 years into the full-scale war against Ukraine, when like all decent opinion in Russia is punished severely, like when you will be sent to a colony for like 7 or 8 years for just calling the war and not special military operation, that as recently as in like 2021 or 2020, in local, municipal, regional elections, candidates endorsed by Alexej Navalny and his movement not got 10% of the votes or 15% of the votes, got the majority of the votes, like won elections like many, many times against candidates from Putin's party, from United Russia, against candidates endorsed by Putin, which was basically the reason why Putin tried to kill him in 2020, because we are just winning. And
well, today you would...
of course, so now we are much smaller. We're still a significant organization. We are based in Vilnius. We are a group of about 100 people. And we run a portfolio of like 15 different political projects incepted by Alexej Navalny, but also incepted by Yulia Navalny, which are very different, but which have to do always something with Russia and with creating stress for Putin and his regime inside the country. So we try our best not to become a emigre organization, a diaspora organization. Like we try our best. It's not always possible, but we try our best to stay relevant to domestic political agenda and to talk to our supporters in Russia and to talk to people in Russia about what's relevant to their everyday life, about the...
Okay, but give us an example, maybe, how that works, because it's extremely dangerous for you to even talk to people in Russia if they are seen to be associated with you.
Yeah, like an open association with us is not possible. Like everyone who is considered to be like a member of our organization is like will be sent to prison immediately. But we still are able to maintain significant media outreach. Our most important channels of communication are YouTube, Telegram, and TikTok. Suddenly, also because TikTok is not banned in Russia, unlike YouTube and Telegram, because Putin is obviously much more afraid of his big Chinese brother than of his big American friend. And our monthly audience in Russia right now, as we talk, is between 15 and 18 million people. Like every month we communicate with 18 million people inside the country, like talking to them about what's actually going on, like truth about the war crimes and atrocities, countering the propaganda, and basically just keeping them, helping them to stay sane in this crazy world, because otherwise, well, their life would be filled with propaganda and fear only. Because, well, Putin rules through repression. He tries whatever possible to amplify the pro-war voices within the Russian society and to silence the anti-war voices. So we try to keep the sense of staying in touch with reality for those people who are against Putin, against the war, and who stay in Russia. It's a very important mission. We also try to stay in touch with the reality of what's going on in the Russian society. It's much more complicated now than it was because, of course, when we operated inside the country, when we traveled to different Russian cities, when we walked the same streets as our compatriots, we didn't need any extra research to feel what Russians feel. Now we are in a situation which is beautifully described in the very important book Alice in the Wonderland, where the Black Queen says to Alice, "Girl, it's a place where you have to run very fast to stay where you are." And that's what we are doing. It's very complicated to stay relevant. It's very complicated to get the feeling, the sense of what's actually going in Russia, what's actually going like in the minds of our compatriots. And we try to like apply different approaches actually to stay in touch. That's an important part of our work.
But for example, if you do an opinion poll, if you want to know what people are thinking, so nowadays you cannot phone someone and say, answer the following question. Do you think Putin is a good president? Because for that question, you can go to prison.
Absolutely.
So how do you conduct polls?
Absolutely. And still we do a lot of polling. Actually, we do an opinion poll every month, exactly in the way you describe. We call and we ask questions to give a sense. Our usual opinion poll has a sample size of 1,000. What's your feeling? How many calls we have to make to actually collect 1,000 answers? Any guesses? 120,000 on average. 120,000. Because the sample has to be balanced, it has to be age balanced, gender balanced, geographically balanced. People don't have to be afraid. People should be willing to talk to a stranger. So we do an average of 120,000 outcoming calls. 20,000 people would actually pick up when an unknown caller is calling. 5,000 people would start the conversation and would not tell the pollster to fuck off immediately. Yeah. And then probably 1,000 of them will then actually go the poll to the end. And we never ask any direct question. The favorite question that we ask, to give a sense, if there were additional funds in Russian budget, how would you spend them? Mm-hmm. Would you prefer them to be spent on education, healthcare, infrastructure, or military? The answer military got 22% of preference in 2022, 14% in 2024, 7% in our latest poll conducted in December 2025. Once again, we are only talking to those who are ready to talk to an anonymous pollster who knows who he is. So it's dangerous. So we definitely do a systematic mistake in our polling, a huge systematic mistake, because of course we are not talking to random people. Mm. We are talking to a very specific subset of the general public, those ready to talk on the phone. But even among those people, when we do the same, when we repeat the same question every month, we can observe a dynamics, and this dynamics is important. And this dynamics, going down from 22 to 7%, who believes that military expenses are the most important thing, is quite important because, well, these are the very people who live under a constant pressure of propaganda telling them that we are at existential war against NATO, against the West. It's not just about Ukraine, it's about, the future of our children, and if we lose, and, NATO soldiers will be stationed in every of your flats and raping your daughters and blah, 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 etc., etc. So, and among all these propaganda pressure, now only 7% believes that the priority of budget spending should be military.
So
and
basically,
that's important to know.
Basically what you're saying is they're sick of the war and they are trying to communicate this by answering the question.
Yes, they are absolutely exhausted of the war. This is a war of attrition, like a classical war of attrition, and the attrition is actually happening. So the historical, like the consumer optimism is at historical lows. Like, is your family planning to make a major purchase next year, like to buy a new car or like something like this? Like, it's at historical lows. I don't recall the exact number, but like below 20%. And it used to be like 30, 40. Is your family expecting the next year to make the financial situation better for your family? It's now like 28% expects that the next year will make the financial situation better for their family. That are very clear signs of this exhaustion, of this attrition. Now, the trend is not linear, unfortunately. The trend was linear before the end of 2024. Then suddenly optimism rised again, and then once again started to decline. Why? January 20th, 2025. Donald Trump is the answer. Donald Trump and the so-called peace negotiations, which from the very beginning were obvious, were leading nowhere, didn't have any ground because Putin wants to continue because he basically believes he is winning. But we are all human beings. If there is hope, we can carry on. We can wait a little bit more and a little bit more if we see a light at the end of the tunnel. So after January 20th, 2025, after Trump started all these negotiations, the optimism has grown in Russian society because everyone was thinking, okay, finally, it's going to an end. Couple of months, it's going to be over. Like Putin's army was able to recruit the record number of soldiers. Like I want to say volunteers, they are not volunteers, they are getting heavily paid. But still, like in February, March and April 2025, because everyone said, okay, now it's going to be over very soon, but I'll return back home earning a lot of money, maybe like as a decorated veteran, I'll get some privileges and so on. So actually, this whole situation like just allowed Putin to win time. Just because when the society became like more optimistic, it was much easier for him to continue his war. Now, Russian society has realized like that this all was actually bullshit and going nowhere, and the trend, like after June 2025, the trend started to decline again, and now they are pessimistic as they never were. But still, we feel that the year was lost, and so many lives were lost, just because of this inconsistency. That's how like British formulated it. That the only actually recipe to fight in a war of attrition is keep calm and carry on. Like consistency was the most important thing. We can discuss how efficient was what Europe was doing, like in helping Ukraine, in sanctioning Putin's regime, like oil price caps and whatever. But it was a strategy. Like any strategy is better than no strategy.
But let's just to be clear, when you say the negotiations don't lead to anything or have never been planned to lead to anything, do you think the strategy of Europe should be no negotiations with Putin? President Macron of France today called for a meeting with Putin. Should leaders of Europe go to meet him and talk? Is it the most important thing to support the Ukraine militarily, to help them fight the army on the ground?
Two things. First, I don't believe in negotiations with Putin, just because I don't believe in negotiations for the sake of negotiations. We want to have negotiations if we want to achieve some result. some treaty that will be respected. Putin has a unique track record of not respecting the treaties he has ever signed, from the Budapest Memorandum of like 1994 about territorial integrity of Ukraine, to Minsk agreements, to, I don't know, all the possible human rights conventions, etc., etc. So, I mean, even if these negotiations end up with some document where Putin puts his signature on, this document isn't worth the time spent, and it isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Second, there is no such thing as the most important thing. This is the war of the 21st century, a war of attrition. It's not fought on one front. It's very multidimensional. You can't say that the most important thing is to help Ukraine militarily, everything else is irrelevant. Everything is relevant. Everything that creates stress for Putin is relevant. Helping Ukraine militarily is important. Fighting against Putin propaganda within Russia is important. Sanctioning Putin is important. Hunting his shadow fleet is important. Whatever makes life more complicated for him is important. You cannot say that there is like one solution, one silver bullet, one strategy that will help. The only possible strategy is to mount pressure from all possible directions using all available tools, and then at some point he will make a critical mistake because, well, that's also human nature. People under stress tend to make mistakes.
Okay, I understand. So one strategy, for example, that I think you tried was to split Putin's circle and the oligarchs that support him. And what you did at that point in 2023 was to sign, together with other personalities, a letter to the European Union to relieve individuals like Michael Friedman from being sanctioned. So he has been very in the circle of Putin oligarchs, in the court of Putin for many years, and also up until the war, but resided in Britain. So the big question was then, was that a huge mistake to try to get someone like Friedman off the list because he was really seen as a loyalist to Putin? And did you damage the reputation of the FBK through that, through your own organization, or not?
Let's first correct the facts. I didn't sign that letter. That was the collective letter of many actors of Russian opposition that was signed in February 2023. I wrote a letter to Borrell, who was the head of the foreign minister of the European Union, in October 2022. That's very important. October 2022, that was just after liberation of Kharkiv region, and like when Russian army was actually fleeing, and when it was obvious that Kherson will be also liberated very soon. And at that point of time, many Russian oligarchs started to knock all possible doors, including ours, saying, we are ready to defect, we are ready to break ties with Putin, but Putin will immediately arrest all the assets we have in Russia, and all our assets in Europe are also frozen, so we'll lose everything. Let's try to invent some pathway for us, some exit way, so that, like, if we break our ties with Putin, if we condemn the war, if we leave Russia, then, like, I don't know, if we donate like 50% of our wealth for Ukraine, then there will be sanction relief for us in the West. And in October 2022, that sounded a very good idea for me, not only for me. That was the McFaul-Yermak Commission suggested exactly the same. Like Andrei Yermak, who was the head of the office of President Zelensky, together with Michael McFaul, who was the former ambassador, they had a commission on sanction, and their proposal was exactly the same. Like, create an exit way for the Russian oligarchs who want to break their ties with Putin, so to split the elite. And in the political context of October 2022, that was a perfect idea, and I still regret that idea never was adopted by Europeans, that like von der Leyen and the Commission didn't suggest some like way out of the sanctions for those oligarchs willing to split with Putin. What I did very wrong as a politician, that I didn't think about the consequences. I wrote this letter, like, and then when it was published in a very different context in March 2023, when half a year later, when everything was over and it was clear that there will be no sanction relief and Putin already consolidated the elite and so on, it looked very bad. It looked like if I was like trying to, I don't know, like enter some deal with those oligarchs, and I should have thought about this. So my mistake, which I admitted, was that I didn't do it publicly back then in October 22, that I just wrote this letter and didn't think about how it will look when it will be published much later. And well, for this mistake, like I admitted it, I apologized, and I stated that I will leave my position as a like chairman of the board of our foundation, which I did.
Yeah.
So, and I started to do like different projects.
All right,
But
so,
once again, I want to underline that I still believe that the idea was correct, that at that point of time when Ukraine was actually winning, like every step towards like weakening Putin and splitting the regime was worth trying.
But if you look at Michael Friedman, I think went back to Moscow. In terms of, can we see any cracks around him? Because of course Russia also is a black box. We don't have a proper public opinion there. But from what you gather, are people getting restless because they want the war to stop on the level of the leadership?
No, so now there are no cracks. So Putin managed to consolidate his elite, which was not the case in fall 2022, but now it's the case, through fear and through these feelings, through this perception that they have nowhere to go. We are in the same boat. Either we all sink or we all somehow survive the situation. And that's because there was no Western strategy implemented to split them, unfortunately. But, well, now that's the case. Now we have to deal with this reality.
That means also that, for example, the big success, I think, of the foundation, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, were these films that Maria Pevchik was making, partly together with Bellingcat. So if you remember this fantastic film about Putin's palace, where we saw how he lives, but also another one that was very, very, also emotionally impactful was the film when Navalny, together with Christo Grozev, phoned his murderers, basically his attempted murderers, to discuss how they made the operation against him. So these films, millions of people saw them at the time. Navalny was still alive. And that was a reach also into Russia to millions of people. When you said at the beginning that you reach about 50 million viewers, are these new film projects that are being produced now, or is it more a kind of commentary that you try to bring in?
We publish investigative videos still, I think at least once a month. We also do a lot of commentary, we do a lot of counter-propaganda, and we do just a lot of videos about the, once again, like current situation in Russia. Like the most successful videos of 2025 were what we call true crime. Like a guy killed his girlfriend, got arrested, like got 20 years, signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense, got released, went to war, got wounded, went back to his hometown, married another girl, killed her, once again, blah, blah, blah. All based on true facts, all based on what's actually happening, and just like telling the society, once again, like, well, the truth about the consequences of the war, but also linking it to Putin personally. Because when a person is released when someone is like serving 20 years for murder and is released, it requires a presidential signature. Putin has to sign his pardon, and that's a requirement. So we can kind of like explain the link between Putin, his war, his personal action and personal responsibility, and the fact that the town is terrorized by the so-called veterans, like returning from the front lines with PTSD and etc., etc. And these videos have a lot of impact in local communities, and we see like also millions of views from them. It's not investigative journalism, it's just like telling the people about themselves, about their lives. But that's important because we are, well, Soviet Union lost 15,000 people in Afghanistan in 11 years. Soviet Union was twice larger than Russia now, 280 million versus 140. The total number of soldiers that served in Afghanistan 1979 to 1989 was about 650,000. So less than Russia has now in trenches in Ukraine at any given moment. And still the society remembers how dramatic it was when the soldiers came back home. Like the core of organized crime, the core of the street gangs in the 90s were the veterans of Afghanistan. Because of course, no one took care of them, no one treated them, and many of those people, like with their traumas and with their like experiences with weapons and Gewalt.
Violence.
They basically like became like killers and gangsters and so on. So it's quite obvious for the Russian society that after the Ukraine war will be over, this is gonna happen once again, but at much worse scale.
Yeah.
And we are just telling them that there is a cost, the price of the war that Russia will have to pay after all, and this is something that's a very uncomfortable thought, of course, but it's worth telling, and it's also very uncomfortable for Putin, because we basically say the longer it continues, the harsher the consequences will be.
But the interesting thing is that the way you're talking about your work is you're trying to influence into Russia the political situation in Russia, and not so much to unite the Russian opposition in the West, in the diaspora.
Yes, that's our priority. We are a Russian political organization. That's our mission, that's our heritage. We have been, like when the full-scale invasion has started, like in February 2022, we've been among all like Russian political organizations, one with by far like the largest number of supporters and followers inside the country. So it was both our mission and responsibility and moral obligation, like to stay in touch with them, to support them and so on. So we've chosen with our very limited resources to concentrate on this line of work. So we intentionally are not involved in like all the diaspora work and so on, because there are other organizations that do this also very important and brilliant work, but that's just not our piece of cake. We have to set the priorities, and our strength was in that fact that we had this broad regional network and many supporters all around the country, and the ability to influence public opinion. So kind of like we selected for us this part of the front line, information warfare against Putin's propaganda, against Putin's regime inside Russia.
Because if you look at who is in, everyone I always interviewed in Russia when I was a correspondent there is either dead now, poisoned or killed, shot dead, brought to death in a prison, or lives in London or Berlin or in Vilnius. And there are a lot of distinguished figures like Vladimir Karamurza, who we had also here. They also got here, and his wife got the Kreisky Prize. for their courage. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who I see from time to time in London, all these people are trying to sort of establish sort of the united front against Putin. And for example, if you look at the platform for dialogue that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, the Europarat, has set up just now, a few weeks ago, there was a big debate who should join this platform and who shouldn't. And I think you decided that you didn't want to be part of it.
Absolutely.
Why was that?
For the very reasons that I explained, that life's short, time's limited, resources are limited. So we have to make our choices. We are not such a large organization anymore. So we have to decide if we spend our time in Strasbourg or if we spend our time trying to influence more people in Russia. And we decided that there are so many people willing to go to Strasbourg and willing to participate in these discussions in Strasbourg. Okay, let them go. So we were invited. We had a discussion within our organization, within our political council, and we've decided that we will not join this year. They told that this platform is an experiment. The mandate is not clearly set. The rules are not set for what this organization is actually what they can do, what they can't do, and then in a year, this platform will be reconsidered. It will be reconsidered, what it should be doing, how it should be formed, because now it was not even elected; it was appointed. So we decided that we'll see, we'll observe, and if we will see after a year that something practical can be achieved using this toolkit, then no problem. We will, of course, accept the invitation and we join. But this year, we deliberately decided that we'll pass on the invitation.
Another group that tried to be part of the platform for dialogue was a group of a man that you actually had a recent sort of little scandal around. The Russian Volunteer Corps is a group that fights with the Ukrainian army, but is led by a far-right activist called Denis Kapustin, who is banned from the European Union because he's a neo-Nazi. He lived in Germany for a while. And he joined together with the Azov group, which is this regiment in the Ukrainian army that also comes from a relatively far-right background. They joined the war effort in the Ukraine against Russia. So when it was reported that Denis Kapustin was killed, you sent a private message, I believe, which celebrated his death. And that led to the fact that a lot of people felt that you were undermining the Ukrainian effort to fight. Can you explain this a little bit to us? Why you wrote this?
First of all, this actually happened, and this was a big scandal the last couple of months. This guy, Kapustin, was proclaimed dead in December 2025. Then it was announced that it was a fake death and he actually was not killed, but that was some kind of covert operation or something. And yes, when he was proclaimed dead, I indeed sent a very emotional and stupid, and I apologized for it, message to our former colleagues that used to work with us, but then started to work with those guys from this Russian Voluntary Corps, saying that, that was a nasty message, indeed. The thing is that, bad words apart, now I'll have to be careful, but I'll try to explain still. The idea of having a unit of Russians fighting within the Ukrainian army against Russian invasion is a valid idea. There are Russians that are ready to fight with firearms in their hands against Putin's army. That's totally okay. the idea that this unit will be led by a neo-Nazi. And he was appointed, I mean, someone appointed him. And this unit is, this Russian Voluntary Corps is a small unit. It has like 50 to 60 people. It's, so compared to the size of like Ukrainian army, which is like 600,000 people, it's like 0.01%. To appoint a person who is banned from entering the EU for being a neo-Nazi is, I believe, a politically wrong idea because it helps Putin's propaganda. That's what Putin was saying from the very beginning. Like, we are fighting against Nazis in Ukraine, and then you appoint a guy like tattooed with swastikas all around to kind of like to run a military unit within the Ukrainian army. That's a stupid thing from my point of view. And then finally, there is a political idea supported by some, not everyone, by some Ukrainian politicians that that's the only way the Russian opposition should behave. Like we heard some Ukrainian politicians say, now these guys who are fighting with firearms are the real Russian opposition to Putin, and all others are fake opposition, are like not a real opposition. Here, I have to respectfully disagree. So, okay, those 60 people, led by a Nazi guy, engaged in some like real fight, killing some invaders, some occupants, are definitely contributing to the success of Ukraine, to the military success. Are they contributing more than 0.1% or less? I don't know. We don't have any data. But, well, their contribution should be somehow comparable with the size of this unit. We are talking to millions of people. Because of our work, we hope, like hundreds of thousands of people or thousands of people, however, like never signed a contract, never joined the Russian army, never fell into hands of Russian propaganda, never went to kill someone in Ukraine, and never had to be killed. That's important. Or not to talk about us. There is a voluntary movement organized by Memorial, the Nobel Prize winners, a very reputable Russian human rights organization, which is called Idite lesem, Go by the Forest, which basically helps Russian servicemen to defect, like help Russian soldiers to desert, to leave the front line and so on. They managed to evacuate 12,000 people. That's a huge impact. Like 12,000 people who didn't go to fight, who didn't have to be killed, who didn't kill anyone, and so on. I bet whatever money I have that their impact is much higher than any impact that this unit of 60 people might ever achieve. So now this idea that this is the only true opposition and everything else is fake, it's not only, like derogatory, it's also it's just wrong. But this is a political technology. Like someone in like Ukrainian political circles decided that it's like beneficial to like advertise the small unit as the only opposition and kind of like denigrate all the other parts of the Russian opposition as weak, not able to do anything and so on. And in my opinion, this is a bad political technology because Putin is our common enemy and we have to use all the possible ways to fight against him. And well, while my message was very wrong in how it was written, the core idea was, and it actually said it, I wish Ukraine to win, but it will be much harder when it places its bets on people like Kapustin. And yes, this is the idea I still share.
Yeah.
I don't think it's wrong.
But to sum it up, if you want to unite the Russian opposition, it makes sense not to include everyone, even in times of war.
No. I don't think it makes sense to unite the Russian opposition. I think that the Russian opposition, in its current situation, when there are different groups trying to make impact through different tools and ways, someone are ready to use firearms, someone are not ready. Someone are using these channels of communications and someone are using that channels of communication. That's way more efficient than a virtual and impossible united Russian opposition that would always tell the same thing. We already have Putin's party, United Russia. You don't have one opposition party in your country. We don't need the opposition version of United Russia. It's good that there are people who are ready to listen to, like Vladimir Kara-Murza, and better accept the way Vladimir Kara-Murza puts his message out, and there are people who are ready to listen to us, and there are people who are ready to listen to these folks and these folks and these folks. And being diverse, we are able to achieve more and to talk to more people in Russia, and that's the more efficient way to operate. Political unification is always a product of compromise. Like in politics, as you perfectly know, like 4 plus 4 equals 6, maybe 7, but never 8. I have a party, you have a party, we are polling at 4%, you are polling at 4%, the electoral threshold in our country is 5%. We do a coalition, and this coalition might end up with 6% or 7%, because someone will not be ready to vote for the joint party because of the compromises we have to make to achieve this union. But still it makes sense, because otherwise we will not go over the electoral threshold. This is, well, unifications that make sense. But in our situation, we don't have any elections, we don't have anything. We can spend days and months and hours talking and compromising and losing supporters because of the compromiser. Because there are people for whom, like, I don't know, like any coalition with like Khodorkovsky is unacceptable because he's a former oligarch, and many people believe that as an oligarch he is also like kind of like guilty of bringing Putin to power and so on. And there are people who believe that coalition with me is not possible because, well, I said bad words about Denis Kapustin and so on. So when we'll try to build a coalition, we will lose someone. When we act as different actors, we are able to achieve more. And that's how it works.
Let me give you one counter argument to that. Because if people in Russia now look at the dictatorship of Putin and the war that they cannot get out of, and they want to look to someone that could possibly be a leader of the opposition. So Navalny had this role, also not for everyone, but he was sort of clearly the strongest personality among the opposition figures, where people thought like maybe he could replace Putin, also precisely because he had a sort of nationalist background, because he was willing to fight for Russia in Russia and not sit outside. And so he was seen as this person. So he's gone. The question is, do you see Yulia, his widow, as the person who could be leading the opposition?
Of course, there will be time when the situation in Russia will change. There will be a window of opportunities. We will go back there. Yulia will participate in elections. We know how to run campaigns. We know how to organize people, and then we'll compete. It's not granted that we will win. If Navalny would be allowed to participate in elections, which he never was after his success in 2013, it was never granted that he would win, but he would achieve something. We are absolutely ready to take on a political fight. That's how democracy works. And I believe in like Yulia's leadership, and I try to do, and like our organization tries whatever possible to do to promote her leadership, and others believe in other people and help them, and that's normal politics. Now, Navalny was seen as a leader of the Russian opposition, you said. That's true. Not because of some compromise, not because someone negotiated and decided that he is the leader, but because he deserved it. He took enormous personal risks. He was very inventive. He invented some new formats. He did this incredible investigations. He conquered so many hearts through his personal bravery and so on and so on. Well, Yulia is a different person. He was very close to him, both like personally and politically. They were closest political allies, but of course, like personally, she's very different. But she's trying, well, she also takes huge risks, and she also does a lot of political work. But he clearly wants to be the representative of those voiceless Russians who are now in Russia under constant fear of being persecuted for their political opinion. At every international gathering, like in a few days at the Munich Security Conference and in many other places where he speaks up, where he participates, he talks like as a representative of people inside Russia who can't speak up now. But we believe, we might be wrong, we don't have a time machine. We believe that there are many of those people and they will be the driving force of change in the country, like after Putin is gone or after Putin is weakened. So that's how we place our bets. We might be wrong, like other people might have a different idea. There are people who believe that like democratic change is not possible in Russia, like change from within will never happen, and like the only way to bring change to Russia is, I don't know, like to create a situation when like Russian army will be defeated in such a way that like Ukrainian tanks will enter Moscow. Well, I don't believe it's feasible. They don't believe that democratization from within is feasible, and that's what I believe in. We do have different beliefs. That's okay. That's normal, and still we share a common enemy. So while I don't believe in the unification for the sake of unification, I do very much believe in the possibility of ad hoc unions for like practical things and for particular projects. And like just one good example, there is an annual fundraiser for Russian political prisoners every year on the Russian National Day on June 12th. Like there is a huge fundraiser on YouTube where like for 12 hours we basically tell the stories of political prisoners and raise money to support their families and their lawyers and so on. In this very practical event, everyone participates. Like we participate, Khodorkovsky people participate, Karamurza participates, and like everyone. Because it's a very practical goal. We don't need to sign a coalition agreement to decide that that's a good thing to support Russian political prisoners and to work together to achieve this goal. That's okay.
But that means also that you don't plan to basically change the organization that you have now into a political party, or that you're talking to other movements and groups, if maybe you should set up a structure where you have a kind of exile parliament or exile government?
We don't have a mandate, I believe, to build an like exiled parliament or exiled government. No one will take it seriously. I know about like comparisons with like Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya, but she won the election, so that's where her legitimacy comes from in Belarus. So we don't have same situation. And in our situation, if we try to, like for instance, run an like electoral-like procedure, only political immigrants will be able to participate. It would be dangerous for people from inside Russia to participate. So this kind of like body that would be elected, shadow government or shadow parliament, would by definition, by design, only represent the political immigration. So it will make the split between those who are in the country and those who left deeper, which is not our goal. So I don't believe it's actually feasible. I don't believe it's necessary. While we operated inside the country, we tried.
Yes.
we tried to register a political party many
for sure,
times.
yeah.
We were always declined for some stupid formal reasons. But of course, we acted as a political party. We had our offices in every major city. We had a huge network of supporters, etc., etc. Now we are in a different situation. We have to face it. We are much weaker than we were 5 years ago. But that's politics. It's a pendulum. Today you are weaker, tomorrow you are stronger. You have to never give up and keep working.
Thank you, Leo, for your explanations. Let's take some questions from you. We also